Susan Stern, welcome to Minds Worth Meeting. Thanks so much for being here with us on this snowy winter day.
Glad to be here.
You are an multi-hyphenate entrepreneur, wife, mom, grandmother, fashionista, and globetrotter. And we're so excited to learn from you today, understand your journey, and how you came to be who you are. So why don't you take us back? Tell us about the beginning of your career. You can start at college. Tell us, what were your goals?
Interesting question. I'm going to go back a little before college, just to say that I always loved to work. And my first jobs were babysitting, mother's helper, and then once I was legally able to work, I worked in companies in the city. And I worked for an accounting firm in the summers, and I worked for a life insurance company in different summers. And there was just this great feeling about being part of a team and having the place to go, and quite honestly, getting a paycheck. That was, the first that it felt so good not to be reliant fully on your family. So when I was in college, I really studied the things that I just loved and interested me. And back then, there was no communications field. There were no degrees in public relations or communication. So I studied a lot of different types of liberal art subjects, and I always loved to write. So after college, I got my very first full-time job. Believe it or not, I worked at Cosmopolitan magazine.
I believe it. I absolutely believe it.
And I was just, back in those days, you come in, you're very, very entry level, and you're kind of an assistant to a senior editor or art director. And the way you learn is simply just looking around and watching what other people do, because there was no formal training program of any kind. And so while I loved my first boss, I was in the art department, and I don't have 1 ounce of creative visual talent in me. So after a while, I got a transfer. I asked if I could take a different position. I became the office manager. So I was more exposed to the business part of running the office, which was a skill set that served me well later in my career, obviously. And then from there, I wanted to learn about the editorial side of the magazine. And so I became the assistant to the articles editor, where I was vetting story ideas. And that's what opened my eyes to PR. Because I was getting phone calls, because that's it, phone calls, and written letters suggesting different types of stories coming from PR people. Well, it became clear to me that a huge percentage of them had never, ever opened this magazine. So I can still remember getting some pitch from some industrial company that made some type of widget for cars. And this is back in 1975. And, it was just like, how can you pitch this story if you haven't even looked at who the audience is and the readership is? And so that did get me really interested in PR. Ultimately, from there, I went to the corporate side. Those were my first few jobs in PR. And they were in what you would never think of as technology today, but back then, that was as high as the tech was, which were businesses that were beginning to use word processing. And there was talk about an internet coming, and email coming, but it wasn't there yet. But I worked in the Wall Street area in a very male-dominated environment. and I was in charge of writing in-house newsletter.
Okay.
And I did that for a while. And then we had a customer newsletter. So it was the first I could really dabble in writing that wasn't for school.
Right.
And I loved it. So I found like that being an eye-opener for me of what I might want to continue to do. Well, after several jobs, I realized that if I went to an agency, I would be in a better position because I would be on the earnings side of the business, and I would be able to work on a variety of different accounts versus just one subject. And so I got a job at a big firm, and I loved that. I was there for about 3 years. But during that time, there was a lot of management change.
Okay.
And so after about 3 years, Danny and I had our first child, and I decided that I really didn't want to commute to New York anymore.
Who would?
Who would? Yes, it was a 2-train, 2-subway ride.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be closer to home. And so what happened was one of my clients, during my maternity leave, was serviced by a team at the agency. And he called me when my maternity leave was about to end. And he said, I just need you to know, the service has really dipped. I do not like how I'm being treated. I feel I'm being billed for a lot of things I should not be billed for, that should be new business that the agency absorbs. So I am leaving no matter what. Would you consider working for us? And it was a great opportunity.
Yeah.
I had no compete agreements of any form.
Right.
And I didn't approach them at all. They came to me. And I thought, this sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
I can work from home, make my own hours. So that's the genesis right then and there of the company.
Okay.
And at first I thought about it, and I thought, well, maybe it's too soon. I just had this baby. Maybe I should hold off. Maybe I want to try to take a year off and just write or whatever. And then I realized, and also my husband Danny and I talked about it, and it was like, this is a golden opportunity. And they're not going to sit around and wait until you feel like you want to go back to work. They're going to have to, find a resource.
Right.
And it may be now or never. And so that's what I did. So I began working out of the house and had, a babysitter taking care of our daughter. And business started to build with this client, and I needed more resources. So I had a first employee, and she came to the house full time. Everything that we had to do was reaching out to media, so there were a lot of mailings.
Okay.
There was a lot of documents that had to be generated.
And this is all pre-computer, so
yes,
it's a whole different
it
world.
was a whole different world. And we had to package them and put the stamps on, and it was just a lot.
Yeah.
And the client was introducing a new product that was designed for offices all over the country. And it was the first ergonomic chair. So because computers were coming in,
Right.
this was, meant to support your back and be height adjustable and all of those bells and whistles. So it was a big deal, and I had to help make a big deal of it with the media.
Right.
So I would have part-time people coming in and out of the house, and after a while, it just became obvious that I needed to incorporate the company.
Right.
and go someplace else.
Like, we're serious now.
Yes. Yes.
I just want to go back, because one important thing that I thought earlier in your career, you noticed that companies were having trouble. You saw a problem with them being able to communicate properly, with them pitching,
Yes.
a widget company pitching to Cosmopolitan.
Right.
Like, that was clearly a problem. And I love how that evolved into a full business for you.
What I really reflect on is how everything that I observed in my early years of work, I think from the time I was, like a nanny in the summer, was incorporating what I really thought was right and fully rejecting what I didn't like. And learned probably a lot more from observing what I did not like. And from that, I had this dream. And I don't think I ever sat down and said, oh, I really want to have my own company. But the opportunity came my way. And once I made the decision to seize it, I felt like I'm going to do this right. And we're going to have a firm that is strategic, that knows how to get the right kind of attention from the public they're trying to reach,
Right.
that the client has to reach to be a healthy, thriving business. And we're going to do it effectively. And we're going to do it in a way that's always crystally transparent, clear, and meaningful. And I wasn't going to compromise. When I think back on some of the organizations I worked for, it's not that the organizations were necessarily unethical as a whole,
Right.
or bullied people, or it's not the organization. It's that the organization hasn't communicated effectively and instilled and made those values non-negotiable. And I just decided, this is mine now. My name is on the door, and I don't want people treated in ways that either I was treated or I observed people being treated, whether they be clients, employees, vendors, whatever. And if someone isn't cut out for those values, or their personality even doesn't fit with them,
Right.
and they can't adapt to that, then it's just not a match.
Right. Right.
And that's true with the client as well.
True.
So I think I've strayed from your question.
No, that's great, because that makes me think of my interview process here. And from day one, core values, the company's core values have always been kind of central to what we do on a daily basis. So if that was your intention when you founded the company, it has permeated throughout the last 30-something years, 38 years at this point, right? That's amazing. That's amazing. So what was the first company name? Because the company has kind of evolved over the last few decades.
Yes. The names of the company, which changed as we found different services or focused on other aspects of communication, are reflective of those changes.
Right.
So when the company was incorporated in 1985, it was Susan Stern Public Relations, Inc. That's still the legal entity of the organization. Why was it called that? Well, it was just me.
Yeah.
That was it. It was me. And then, as it began to build, and you want to expand, and you don't want to become the one and only person that every client wants to talk to.
Right.
You want to build depth to the organization. You want different kinds of capabilities and talents. And I surely didn't possess them all.
Right.
Nobody does. So I decided that we should come up with a DBA, does business as Stern and Associates. And the graphic designer who helped us come up with the logo made it Stern + Associates. The reason we did that is that I wanted it to look like and be what we were, which was equals. You know, there's me and there's the team and we're one. So there were a few kinks in it. Some companies would start calling us Stern + Associates. Okay, well, I'll take it.
Right.
But that worked for us for a long, long time. Then what happened to bring us to the strategy group? We had a client who was a chief marketing officer at a major Fortune 500 company. We were working with him quite closely. And what he did was say it to me one day. He said, you know, we work with a lot of PR firms, but you guys are so smart and you know strategy better than others. And this isn't just about getting news clips and press conferences. It's about guiding the communications of the organization to reach our goals. And you connect everything that way. So I think you really need to stress more as you try to continue to build strategy. And we did. And by that point, Danny was already in the company, and he had a 4-year non-compete. So he was supporting the PR side of the business, my side of the business, until the 4 years were up.
And for those who don't know Danny, she's referring to Danny Stern, her husband, who is my boss on the speakers and advisors side of the agency.
Yes. And so for Danny, you know, his business is representing speakers with who have topics of vital importance to the world in general and business specifically. And so strategy is key, no matter if they're talking about innovation or human resource issues or management, leadership. It still comes down to strategy.
Right.
So that's who we are.
Well, I'm glad to be part of the crew because it's been a wonderful 8 years here.
Yeah. It sure has. We love having you.
Thank you. Thinking about uncertainty and external factors that affect businesses, you've weathered recessions and market failures. What's kind of your way of thinking about the strategy of the business to make it through those tough times?
Really good question. I would say the first time that happened, you're not prepared for it. Things are humming along, business is building. It's early 1980s, mid 1980s. And then things start to change in the economy. And we had just expanded the business, and we had just moved to bigger headquarters, so we had more expenses.
Yeah.
And it was a very hard time. And on a personal note, right around that time, my mother also passed away. So it was a time of feeling pulled in a lot of different directions and trying to focus on what really mattered most. So one thing I learned is that an organization, if you want it to survive, has to be flexible, and the leader has to be flexible, and sometimes has to make some really hard, uncomfortable decisions that you just do not want to make,
right?
But you're forced to make. And that was a very major lesson for me. I had observed as a child, my dad had a business that had been extremely successful. He was in the millinery, made women's hats, and had a very good run with it. And then one day, in the 1960s, Jackie Kennedy took her hat off. The business died overnight. The whole industry was like wiped.
Right.
And it was really difficult. I mean, we were 4 kids. It was a hard time for him. It affected his health. And he really didn't make it too many years after that, and died at only age 57. So I think that lesson for me was that business is business. You got to figure something out, or not. And if you're going to stick with it, you got to make the tough decisions. And we had clients that were staying with us. It's just they had to slash the budgets.
Right.
So you have to adapt to those new numbers.
Right.
And the way we did that, we negotiated with the landlord. We were able to downsize to another one of their buildings.
Okay.
I did have to reduce the staff, which was the heartbreaker of it.
Right.
But the company survived. And through that, the lesson stayed with me that we can't control what we can't control. All we can do is have our actions and make our choices. And to keep coming back to that was good for the self-confidence when you're doubting these difficult choices. And I felt that that stayed with me through today. And a quick digression is I believe there's so many good lessons that one can learn from different religions, faiths, people who are very spiritual. And there's 5 remembrances in the Buddhist faith.
Okay.
And I mean, I capture all 5 of them, but it goes something like this. Your body will know sickness. You will die. Everyone and everything changes. All you have is your actions. Did I say you will get old?
That's the 5th one, I think.
That's the other one. So there you go.
Yeah.
And that's it. And we all face those things.
Right.
And that's how you need to lead, from my perspective, is be ready to call on your actions, to think about your choices, and do what's best. And by best, I mean for the future. Because you can't allow yourself to wallow in negativity for too long. It isn't healthy for management, employees, clients, whatever.
Right.
You have to look at this thing, analyze it. Here's my choices, A or B, and move on. Rip off the Band-Aid, and it hurts.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of my questions was about your leadership philosophy, and I think that really captures it beautifully. I love the looking at the reality of things and making a decision, sticking with it, moving forward. That's ripping off the Band-Aid.
It's ripping off the Band-Aid. I think the other part of it too is the not having regrets. Because it's easy to look back and go, oh, maybe I should have done that, or I could have done that.
Yeah.
But no, because at that point, you only had the information you had.
Right, right.
And to go back, my grandfather used to say to me, I shouldn't have sold that piece of property.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
I should have waited because the market went up. We didn't know that. You buy a house when you need a house. You sell one when you have to.
Right.
It's hindsight doesn't get you very, very far, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's comforting because it's easy to say, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that.
It is.
But the time has passed and now you got to move forward.
Don't beat yourself up. Mm-hmm. We all have to take chances and risks.
Right.
And you try to make them as safe as possible, but you just don't know what tomorrow brings. We all know that.
So public relations is very much about building relationships. How do you go about building relationships, and the importance of relationships to you?
That brings me back to a sense of what's right, what's wrong, how you want to be treated. Empathy. When I think back to the story of what that first client told me of what was going on when I wasn't around, I realized that they were doing things and charging for things that he wasn't aware of. He thought that was going to be paid for by the agency. Mm-hmm. And so when you hear clients or potential clients talking about their former resources that they parted ways with, it's often because there was something off, not necessarily with the results, but with the relationship of not communicating, not being honest. In some cases, like we've had a lot of clients from smaller cities. And if you're from the East Coast and you have a business that's, Madison Avenue-ish, you may go in and think you have to show off. Or you may just be a show-off.
Yeah.
And yes, you want to showcase what you know and how you can help and win the job. But you also want to be viewed as a comrade, as an equal with the client.
Right.
Not as I know more than you do. And have that sort of arrogance come through. Mm-hmm. I think another thing is, how do you temper expectations in a relationship? And sometimes you can go too far one way or the other. So if you have a client and the demands are unrealistic for the budget or for the material that you're working with, you just can't get the results. I think you just need to have that open conversation and say, we've tried this way, that way. We're brainstorming, would you like to be a part of that? Because we could use something more from you. Or there have been a few times where I've had to say to important clients, the team is feeling demoralized. And it would be great if once in a while you could make them feel appreciated.
Yeah, say thank you.
Say thank you. Say please.
Yeah.
Recognize their, it's as if they work for you. It's not easy, but you have to try to let people understand you, and you have to work to understand them. And the more you can get to know, whether it's the client or an editor or a customer, and remember something about them. It makes the other person feel valued and respected. And I just know that in my early jobs, some people were like that with me, but others were really not nice. And I don't mean necessarily mean, nasty. I just mean, get this, do that. Like firing orders at you.
Right.
Never, is this a good moment? Would you be able to take a break and do that for me now? Or it could wait. Or, considering the other person's needs and the other person's workload, or, what they're going through at the moment. It's not a utopia. I don't think it could ever be, because business is business, and sometimes you need to do something right away. But just make people feel valued.
Yeah. As far as office culture, I know we've kind of touched on the core values, but what's the office culture that you're really striving for?
Look, we can't all love one another, or in some cases even really like one another. But we're all different. That was one of those Buddhist principles.
Yeah.
We're different, we change. And so what was yesterday isn't necessarily going to be tomorrow. But we need to work within that sort of chaos of it all, and look for the best in others, and try to nurture people's strengths, their interests, so that they can be their best selves. And that goes the other way too. That from a communications point of view, people will say, we'd like the employees to tell us what they feel or what they want. Well, yes, we want to hear it. You have to. In the world we're in, or any world,
right,
for that matter, to get some feedback. Doesn't mean we can do it all.
Right.
You can't.
You can't please everybody.
You can't please everybody. And somebody's got to make a decision at the end of the day. So I think that's really important to also realize. I always felt that I wanted a place where people could feel they were their natural selves to some degree, where, within the boundaries of acceptable behavior, have a sense of humor, talk about things that interest them, speak up and ask, like if your job doesn't include a certain skill set, but you have that skill set and you'd like to further develop it, bring it up. You have an idea, share it.
Yeah.
But also accept that it may or may not fly.
Right.
Or that the objective within a team is to win and to have the best possible thing happen for that client, so that everybody shares in the benefit of that.
Right.
Retaining the client, possibly building the business, attracting new business. And so you may write something and then have it critiqued, but that doesn't mean it's bad. But you have to be able to communicate that and say, you did a good job with this, but it needed some tightening up, or it needed a little more flair over here, or whatever. But that if the final is great, then you should be happy.
Right.
So you've got to let go of that sense of ownership. And I think, that is difficult for some people.
Yes, it is.
I don't think you're that way. But, some people are great at team sports and some people just aren't.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely been a team effort as long as I've been here. I mean, I can pinpoint times when everybody in the company their advice, opinions were solicited so that you could make a better decision. Back when we were rebranding to put the Speaker Bureau and PR company together, when we were trying to figure out what the work situation was going to be during the pandemic, everybody had a voice and an opportunity to, express what would work for them. And was everybody happy? No, but everybody was heard and considered, and concessions were made. So that's a great way to lead, and I'm happier for it.
That's good.
You've done a lot of reading. You read a lot. You've represented authors throughout the years for their PR programs. Do you have a favorite book that's helped you in your leadership journey as a professional communicator?
I mean, one of our clients, Hal Gregerson, writes a lot about questioning. And I think the art of questioning is so important for everyone, in an office setting and not, that it's critical that we ask people questions. We ask when we're young, Hal says, when we're in school, or before you get to school. Why is the moon not a whole moon tonight?
Right.
Why is it raining when yesterday it was snowy? We question, we're inquisitive animals. But as time goes on and pressures mount, somehow that wonderful skill gets sublimated. And in school, then you can often be just repeating, regurgitating, as we used to say, what the teacher said or the book said or whatever. But to think about questioning and to always be questioning, are we doing the best? How could we do better? Is this the only way to approach it? How are you feeling? How did that situation make you feel? Why do you think you responded that way? Instead of just talking facts. I think it really does make a huge difference and helps groups arrive at solutions they might never have considered in the first place.
Right. Wonderful. So you took a step back from the business in 2021 and decided to retire, and you left us all here, but not really left us. So what have you been doing over the last year or so in your retirement? And do you have any goals for the rest of your retirement?
It's nice to smell the roses, even when they're not in bloom. And I have found a very different sense of space. The just contemplating and thinking about things in a different way. I like to be outdoors. I like to walk. I've got the 4 grandchildren who I love to spend time with. A great group of friends. Love to read historical novels. So I'm very into that. I volunteer for a couple of nonprofits in the community that are very dear to me. Sometimes it's a communications request, for me to review something before it goes to print, something like that. But I've been, asked to take on more significant positions, in terms of, like, be a board member but I'm not jumping at it.
Sounds like you have a full plate already. I mean, the grandchildren alone, it's a full plate.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So,
And I just love to be with people, one-on-one in particular. Mm-hmm. And I'm just not sure I want to be a leader again. It's been a great journey.
Wonderful. So before we wrap up our chat, we like to do a lightning round. And these are quick questions. Give us the first answer that comes to your mind. Okay. They're easy questions, but it does have a Women's History Month slant because we are in, one of the greatest months of the year. And this episode will kind of round out our month of speaking to remarkable women. So lightning round, 3 questions, quick, fast.
Okay.
Ready? All right. Who has been the most influential woman in your life?
My mother.
Why your mother?
My mother was a role model when I became, I guess, maybe around 10 years old. Mm-hmm. And she had to go back to work because I had mentioned my dad's business. Mm-hmm. And she took on multiple jobs. She went back to school. She became a school teacher, like someone I know. And she became a tutor for adults, for underprivileged children, also middle school, not easy grades to teach.
Not at all.
But I learned something, and I think that was that for me, I had to feel I always had something that was mine to fall back on, a career, not necessarily owning this business, but just something I really love to do. And that could always put food on the table for a family. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Okay, next question. What's the best piece of advice a woman ever gave you?
Don't lose your confidence. Don't let one setback make you doubt too much.
Right.
Just try again.
Try again. Yes. I love that. And finally, and as a mother of 2 daughters who are wildly successful in their respective arenas, what advice would you give to young women today?
I would say follow your heart. Be flexible. And hope that your dreams will come true. Mm-hmm. But if they don't, find some other ones.
Okay. That's wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you.
Tell our listeners and audience where we can find you online.
You can find me at susan@sternstrategy.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Happy Women's History Month.